We spend a lot of time at work. So much so that we try to make our workspaces feel as comfortable as possible. We bring in pictures of our loved ones, drink out of our personalized coffee cups, put cushions on our chairs, and fancy hand lotion on our desks. But there's some things you just can't change. Most of the time, we don't get to pick out the color or the furniture or the decor. But that pales in comparison to how a space makes us feel. I teach in a very old Victorian schoolhouse in London. And even when children are not present on campus, you can still hear them running up and down the halls. You'll turn off a set of lights, only to find them brightly illuminating the windows once you have locked up the school and are outside. Doors will open, just a crack, as though a child is peeking in to see if you're in the room. Sometimes, when you're walking up the stairs, you'll hear a line of tiny feet following you, only for you to turn around and realize that you're all alone. You'll hear balls bouncing in the empty playground. And sometimes, you'll feel as though a student is standing directly behind you, about to reach out and ask a question. But when you turn, although you are physically alone, it certainly doesn't feel that way. And as spooky and as unsettling as it may feel, it's work. You have to go back. You reach a level of acceptance that you and whoever, or whatever, may be in the space will just have to continue on, coexist, and tolerate one another. But that doesn't mean that you're never taken by surprise, that you're never scared and never shocked by the otherworldly things that you may unexpectedly encounter. Hello and welcome to episode 31 of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. Today we have two stories for you from the hosts of the Homespun Haints podcast. Becky and Diana have a fabulously delightful podcast that is equal parts giggles and ghosts. Both of their stories center around paranormal experiences that they encountered at their places of work. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch, episode 31, Haunting 9 to 5. Our first story comes to us from Diana as she whisks us away to a secluded ski lodge perched on the top of the glorious Colorado mountains.
I'm Diana of the Homespun Haints podcast, and I'm going to tell you a story about when I was a kid. I was 17, so I didn't consider myself a kid, but I was just a kid. I was pretty young and naive. And when I was younger, my family lived in Oklahoma, and every summer it is nasty in Oklahoma. It gets really hot. But fortunately, my parents worked at schools, and so we had summers off. And we would spend the summer in various locales, small mining towns in Colorado, just trying to get away from A, the city, and B, the flat lands of Oklahoma that didn't really have much scenery. So We usually would spend time around the Crested Butte area, if you're familiar at all. It's near Gunnison. There's kind of just one way into town and one way out of town. But it's partway up a mountain, and then you can see this beautiful mountain, the ski mountain, from the whole town. Very beautiful place, very peaceful, small population. Lots of tourists in the summer, but they'd come and go, and so the population's pretty small. But when I was 17, me and my girlfriend at the time decided to get a job as housekeeping staff in a ski lodge up the mountain in Crested Butte.
What the girls didn't realize when applying for this job is that the lodge wasn't on the side of the mountain where the tourists would flock to. It was on the other side of the mountain, about an hour away from civilization, totally secluded and surrounded by picturesque views and idyllic forest scenes.
This is the summer, of course, so nobody's skiing. We're not going to do like a dark, snowed in kind of story here. This is summertime, so it's primarily weddings. So basically, every weekend we would have this huge wedding gathering where every single room was packed with people, extra beds pulled out, tons and tons of people there. And then after Monday, it's pretty dead. We were pretty much there by ourselves. This place, like I mentioned, is up one way out of town, up a gravel road on the side of a cliff, out in the middle of nowhere, basically. And on our way driving there, I actually got my driver's license specifically to be able to go work this job because I wanted to come, go out in Colorado on my own for the first time. And I'm driving my ex's 1986 Volkswagen Jetta, little rickety wagon up the gravel road to this cabin that I can't see yet. I can't see anything except trees, and there's a cliff on my other side. And I'm driving down this gravel road in this rickety old vehicle. All of a sudden, a huge stag jumps out of the forest and smacks directly into the side of my car. I did not hit the deer. It hit me. Scared the daylights out of me because we nearly drove off the cliff on the other side that the deer had pushed us towards.
After this experience, the girls realized that this gravel mountain road was actually quite treacherous, and their car was really not the right vehicle for the area. Since they were an hour away from town, the girls thought it'd be safer, and it just made more sense to stay nearer to the lodge and enjoy the surroundings that the area had to offer.
And they actually did rent us a room there at the lodge. Because we were a couple and everybody else working there was single dudes. They had a little bunkhouse for the dudes, and they had a private room for us. But the private room was not a hotel room as you might imagine it is. The private room was in the attic. No windows, no natural light let in whatsoever. We were happy to have this private room. Of course, it's a nice vacation for us. It was part of our salary. We were barely paid anything as housekeeping staff as 17-year-olds, which is fair because honestly, our work ethic was bleh. But we show up at the lodge, basically no idea what to expect. The manager is one of these tough, kind of burly mountain men, matter of fact, very flippant, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, welcome. Here's this, here's that, here's the laundry room, here's this kitchen." And leans on the stairs up to the attic room and he says, "By the way, did they tell you about the ghost?" I don't know who he meant by they, because we hadn't really talked to anybody at this point. We knew nothing about what we were getting into. So we said, "No, tell us about the ghost." He doesn't really have much of a story. Like I said, burly matter-of-fact mountain man. Yeah, they say this place is haunted. So, you might see something. You never know. We were spooky little goth girls. So we went, "That's great. We're going to see a ghost." We were very excited. So we go up these stairs, creak, up to our attic room, get into the room. Oh, and the manager yells at us as we're going into the room, about to unpack our stuff. "By the way, this place is all on generator power. There's no power lines up here. There are 2 generators, one for the daytime and one for the nighttime. So there's about a 5-minute gap, morning and night, where we switch from one generator to the other. You won't have power. Now remember, we neither have power nor windows in this pitch black attic room that we're sleeping in. We ask the manager, we yell back down the stairs, okay, no problem. Are we the only ones here tonight? He said, yep, goodbye.
And with that, the manager lumbered into his truck and set off down the mountain for the 1-hour commute back into town.
That night, we're trying to, kind of figure out the nightlight situation because this place is pitch black. We're we don't want to leave the door open to the hallway, but at the same time, there's no light, so we're trying to figure out night lights. And just as we're kind of dozing off to sleep, we start hearing creak, 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 creak. And we're like, oh, the wind's blowing. This place is old and creaky. No, that's somebody going up and down the stairs. And we open the door and we peer out down the stairs. There's nobody there. Close the door, go back to bed. 15 minutes later. I swear this happened every 20 minutes all night. I did not sleep. I poked my head out the door no less than 5 times. There was never anybody there. Finally in the morning, I must have gotten some sleep because I woke up in the morning. No idea what time it was because it's pitch black in this room, of course. But check my Nokia, and it's, early in the morning, time to get up and go to work. I pop my head out the door, and I see a man. There's just hanging out in the guy's dormitory right across the hall. And I thought, oh, thank God, there's somebody else here. I'm so relieved. He said, oh, hey, there is somebody else here. I thought I was the only one. Oh, I'm relieved too. And I said, why? And he said, well, you guys were up and down the stairs all night. No, that wasn't us. Oh, he said, well, is there anybody else here? We searched the whole place. There's nobody else there. It's just the 3 of us. And we all heard these footsteps on the staircase going up to the attic, but nobody saw anybody.
After their first restless night, the girls began their housekeeping duties and got to know the lodge really well and began to get a true sense of the building.
Time passes. We're the housekeeping staff, right? So it's our job to clean the rooms. We flip over the towels in the bathroom and we clean out the tubs and such. There are a few rooms that we start to notice, right? We're expecting to see a ghost, right? So we're thinking like spooky thoughts like, oh, around every corner, is that a ghost? And we do see some shadows kind of moving towards the floor in and out of rooms, but never really catch anything with our actual like straight on vision. A few of the rooms at the end of the hall had a slight odor to them when we got there. Just a smelly, like, maybe this place hasn't been cleaned in a while. Maybe there's a backed up sink somewhere or something like that. But as the days passed, the odor got worse and worse. And it started to be the unmistakable smell of death and decay. A few days into working there, I go to clean a tub, pull back the shower curtain, and there is blood covering the entire inside of the tub. I was very shocked by this. But then it happened again, and there was a dead mouse in the tub. So we're so confused. When we go to the cook, the guy who we saw on our first night there, or our first morning there, I guess, and we say, do you have any idea what is killing these mice and, just decapitating them and blood spurting all over the place? It's getting really annoying to clean this up. We got to figure this out. And he said, oh, it's the pine marten. And we said, what is a pine marten? Turns out a pine marten is a type of ferret or weasel that's native to the area. And there was one living inside the walls of this lodge. And it would come out at night and it would kill mice and have a little party with their bodies. All over the bathrooms of this house. I have no idea how it got out of the walls or into the walls, but the cook showed me he'd actually snapped a Polaroid of this critter as it poked its head out of an open hole that had been cut for some kind of installation of an appliance or something or wiring in the kitchen. And it poked its head out and it caught a Polaroid. And it looked like Jaws, just teeth, just straight up sharp little white teeth, just beady little red eyes. It looked like it was about to leap out and claw his face off, basically, in the photo. So we were like, oh, great, that's running around the walls, killing things. Good, wonderful. So the smell was the mice that it had left in the walls, just, that it was done playing with.
There was certainly no shortage of strange happenings at the lodge. From disembodied footsteps to unexplainable shadows, the horrendous smell of decomposing mice, to the shock of blood-splattered bathtubs. But the girls couldn't definitively say that they had seen the ghost of the lodge. That is, not yet.
The main thing that happened basically all summer, we worked there for at least 2 months. No real occurrences, spooky occurrences after the initial shock of the bloody mice in the tub. Until one day, I was changing sheets in the master suite. This is a honeymoon suite. It's on the attic floor up there with the dormitory and with our room, but it's on the other side, so guests don't have to run into us up there as the staff. And it's gorgeous, and there's an amazing tall roof. There's an amazing full wall of windows. This is the least haunted looking place in the entire lodge. It's just a beautiful room. The furniture is all lodge style. There's a huge 4-poster bed that's basically made out of 4 enormous pine trees. And the bed is so tall that there's actually a little staircase that goes up to the bed so that you can get into it if you're not 6.5 feet tall. This is enormous bed, and it's my job to try to change these sheets. I am not 6.5 feet tall, so I would stand on the staircase going up to the bed to change the sheets on this bed. And one day I'm changing the sheets on the bed, and you know how you fluff out a top sheet and then lay it gently down on the bed when you're trying to change the sheets by yourself, because we were pretty short-staffed, I will admit. Fluffed out the sheet, didn't lay right. Fluffed out the sheet again, didn't quite lay right. Fluffed it out one more time, and as I'm looking up at the sheet billowing over my head, I see something press it down to the bed, right in the middle of the sheet. Like somebody dropped a bowling ball on it or put their hand down on it. And of course, as the sheet's settling, I'm expecting to see my partner on the other side, Oh, I came to help you with this sheet because it looks like you're having trouble. Nope, there was nobody there. That was, I think, the closest I've come to actually being interacted with by something that you could say was not actually there on this realm.
Needless to say, Diana never attended to that suite again. But she did get her ghostly experience. So maybe it was all worth it in the end. Our second story comes from Diana's co-host, Becky. Becky is an amazing artist whose story begins when she decided to open up her very own gallery in historic Marietta, Georgia.
So I am an artist by training. I studied art when I lived in Chicago, but I always did it commercially. I was always a graphic designer, and I was rather tired of it. I thought that there's got to be something better than just designing people's logos and websites. And I had this brilliant idea that I would open a fine art gallery in the South during a horrible recession with my family. What could go wrong? So I found a space in the historic district of Marietta Square, which is a very, very old town. These buildings date back 200 years. And it's north of Atlanta. We chose this area because we thought it was a great place for walking traffic to come in. And because we had never done this before, we thought we'd start small. We found a 3,000 square foot antique shop that had to be gutted and renovated the whole thing.
The entire shop had to be stripped to the bones. It was a monumental overhaul. And on top of the refurbishment and the new business, Becky had also just had a baby. It was an incredibly hectic, chaotic, and emotionally and physically consuming time in all of their lives.
A lot of what I'm going to talk about, I think, may have been sparked by all of the overwhelm that I was feeling and a lot of the renovations and energy that we put into restoring this place. But what ended up happening was something that everybody who worked there experienced. It took us about 3 months to renovate, and we finally had our grand opening. And the idea would be that my mother, my sister, and I would be running this place on our own. And hopefully over time, as we grew, we'd be able to hire staff to help us. That never actually happened.
Because there was no other staff, the gallery was always manned by either Becky, her sister, or her mom. And typically, they were alone. Because whoever wasn't there desperately needed a break.
So this gallery, as I mentioned, the building itself was built sometime in the early 1800s. We're not sure exactly when. We imagined it probably would have been haunted when we moved into the space because everything there is. That was just kind of a given. But we never expected to actually see or hear anything. We just figured, yeah, there's probably a ghost here. But one day, about a month after we had officially opened our doors, I was sitting there in the front desk of the gallery. We had in the back, a back room. So there was a door that was an interior door into the gallery, and then a space in the back, and then a door behind that that led out into the parking lot. And the exterior door was this heavy metal door that locked. It was really hard to keep open. We actually had to put giant chunks of concrete to hold it open when we wanted it to stay open. It was very heavy, and it locked automatically. And then that little space in the back was kind of had a creepy vibe. We didn't like to spend much time back there. I always attributed it to the fact that my sister left a lot of mannequins back there, and that's a whole nother story. My family is very odd. So this space back there, nobody wanted to hang out in it, but it was where we kept our tools, where we framed our pieces of work. And then there was the interior door into the gallery space, and we kept that interior door shut so visitors didn't have to see that exterior, that weird space. I was sitting in the front at the counter, and I heard that heavy metal back door swing open and shut. And I thought, oh, good, my sister's here. She's going to help me out. And I sat and I waited. For about 10, 15 minutes, I was probably working on something, sending out emails. And I realized that she was taking a long time to come a few feet through that space into the interior gallery. I thought, that's odd. Maybe she's working on something. So I got up, carrying my baby. I had a newborn, and went over to the space and opened the door, and there was nobody there. I thought, okay, that's odd. Maybe she's went back to her car to get something. So I unlocked that big, heavy door and opened it up and looked out in the back parking lot. No car, just mine. So I figured it was just maybe I heard something, or maybe she came and left, and I forgot about it until the next day when the exact same thing happened. I heard that back door open up. I heard nobody come in, and my sister never showed up. The next time this happened, I actually called her after I'd gone out and noticed her car wasn't there, and I woke her up because it was 11 in the morning and she was still sleeping. Did I mention we were all exhausted? So I called her and she woke her up and she said, no, I haven't been there. And I asked her about the day before and she said no. And I thought, okay, well, that was weird. Moving on. The next day was my day off. And so it was my sister there. And the same thing happened to her. She heard that back door open, and nobody came in.
Over time, the women began to ignore the door. Sure, there was no explanation, but no one had ever actually come into the gallery, so they just assumed they weren't in any actual danger. Maybe they were hearing something from a neighboring shop.
Another thing that began to happen is the walls. That we 3 of our walls were exterior, but one wall we shared with the unit next to us, and it was currently vacant. And we began to hear a lot of banging on that wall, so much so that the walls actually shook. And we thought that somebody new was going to be moving in next door, and they were remodeling. However, when somebody did finally move in, we walked in to see all the changes that they had made because we had heard all of this banging for months. And the place looked identical to how it had looked before those people moved in. And we asked them about it. We said, "Hey, you did a lot of work to this unit, right?" "No, we didn't do anything. We just moved right in." So we thought, okay, that's odd. Maybe we were hearing something. But after they moved in, the banging continued. The banging got worse and worse to the point where the paintings that we hung on those walls began to shake and rattle, and the frames banged against the walls. And at this point, we were pissed. So we ran next door and said, "What are you doing?" And they just looked at us and said, "Nothing. They were just in there selling fudge." And we said, "Okay, well, did you hear the banging?" "No." "How could you not hear the banging? Our paintings were shaking. And these were not little paintings. These were 6-foot, 7-foot paintings shaking on the walls." They never heard a thing.
It was at this point when the women decided that there really was something there. And since it had probably been there before them, they just needed to figure out a way to coexist.
We responded by making sure that we just didn't hang anything with glass on it on that wall because we didn't want it to break. The other 3 walls were reserved for paintings with glass or pictures with glass, and we just hung less delicate work on that wall. Now, before I go any further, I should say that my mother, my sister, and I are all deep believers in the paranormal. We grew up hearing ghost stories. It's just a part of who we are. So as these things continued and we began to realize there was no other explanation, we just kind of accepted it. We weren't scared. We weren't non-believing or trying to come up with other explanations that didn't make sense. We just kind of accepted it and moved on and went about our way. Maybe that's why more things started to happen. I mentioned that the exterior door was opening and closing. Well, then the interior door started opening and closing. We would hear the exterior door open, and then the interior door would open, and then shut, and then another interior door that went into our office would open and shut. And to me, it reminded me of a child running through and slamming the doors. And this would happen in rotation, in a circle. And my sister even caught this on security camera. Now, because, did I mention we were all exhausted? She didn't bother to save the footage. We had one of those security systems that would erase everything at night and start over, but she did see it as it was happening. The final thing that happened were the footsteps. We began to hear what sounded like people walking on the roof, but it didn't sound like they were walking on the current roof. It sounded like they were walking on a wooden roof or a wooden upper floor that wasn't there. We would hear this mostly in the back room and a little bit toward the back of the gallery. And if you went and stopped and listened, it almost sounded like the footsteps weren't even all the way to the ceiling. It was almost like they were just a little bit above our heads, floating.
Every time they heard the heavy footsteps on the roof, they would run outside to see who was up there. They would call the landlord and ask if work was being conducted. They would run around the building to see if there was someone on top of one of the neighboring roofs. But of course, there was never anybody there.
But what really brought it all home was a few years after, I actually left the gallery to go teach at a local university, and my sister and my mother continued working there. And one day, a woman came in to buy a painting of a ghost that we had for sale, and she brought with her a friend who said he had been a paranormal investigator years before and had done an investigation in this very building before we had moved in and renovated. And he said to my sister, "Have you seen anything here? Maybe in the back?" And my sister said, "Why? What's here?" And he said, "Well, I did an investigation here and I picked up the remnants of what seemed like a little boy who claimed he died in a fire in this building in the early 20th century because the building had been rebuilt multiple times, apparently." After this happened, my sister actually went and crawled under the building. She had a good reason. She was trying to put a giant electric eel tank in the gallery. Did I mention my family's really weird? So she needed to make sure that there was a place in the foundation that would be able to support this multiple ton tank. So she was crawling under the building, and she noticed that the foundation did not match the building on top of it. In fact, underneath there were these half walls in weird places that were charred at the top, as if the building had been at a different level at a different time and had burned down and then been rebuilt. Now, one thing the investigator did also tell her is that, I don't know if he caught it on an infrared camera or what, but he said it was as if the boy was moving such that the floor was at his waist. So he was like walking on a different level. So we, at that point, had no reason not to believe that, yep, it was a ghost. We went on. We continued to sell artwork. We closed the gallery 6 years after we opened it. And I bet you anything, the new owners now have a ghost.
What's so fascinating about this story is that Becky received validation about the activity they were experiencing. All of a sudden, the puzzle pieces began to fit together. It's one thing to know that a space is haunted, to accept that activity is going on, but to receive unsolicited confirmation from an outside source, now that is incredible. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come and follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure to check out Homespun Haints wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned to the end of this episode for a little taste of Becky and Diana's show. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.
Ghost stories are always scarier when they're told by the very people who experienced them. Hi, I'm Becky,
And I'm Diana.
and we're the hosts of the Homespun Haints podcast.
We talk to people just like you who've come face to face with ghosts, demons, haints, and other strange paranormal phenomena. All of it makes for a chilling good time.
So grab yourself a sweet tea, turn off the lights, and listen to some eerie, true ghost stories on Homespun Haints, wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm not scared. Are you?